What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. This is VitruvianQA and today I have an informational video for you guys. This is a topic that some of you might find interesting, controversial, downright diabolical. And this is something that a lot of YouTubers won't even touch upon in fear of the ramifications, but luckily, I've got balls of steel. You guys asked for it, I'm gonna give it to you. Today's video topic is vegan bodybuilding. See guys, I told you nobody's talking about this stuff.
A vegan diet.
Vegan plant-based diet. A vegan.
Are you still vegan?
Yes, I was vegan.
Vegan sources of.
I am not a vegan.
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 Vegans.
Alright guys, but in all seriousness, today I just want to do a... You know what, I'm not even going to do the usual thing where I say it's going to be a quick informational video because it's not. And this time I can be sure of that, so if you guys are in for this, get ready for the long haul because there is a lot of research done on this. So I've noticed in the past couple of years, in a few months especially, there's been a lot of back and forth going, especially between, the vegan community and the general bodybuilding community. It's always been assumed that, to be a bodybuilder, you have to consume meat because obviously, most meat products are the primary sources of protein. And I'm getting a lot of comments and questions, and emails of people asking, can it be done? And if so, what is the level of difficulty to which one would have to approach it with? And I think that is kind of been misrepresented, I'm trying to say it nicely, in the YouTube community because, it's almost like you've got two sides of the debate. And as always, there's no middle ground. It's, it's black or white. It's like life or death. And you've got the omnivore or non-vegan side kind of following the standard bodybuilding rhetoric that they've been doing for, decades.
We went to the restaurant where all the ordinary people were sitting, which we called the ordinary folks. And we were sitting there on the table and people were just looking over kind of like, who are these guys?
Big steak, scrambled eggs.
6 eggs over here.
Big steak and I want a tuna omelet.
And a tuna omelet.
Yeah.
Oh, look what he's eating. He's eating 3 hamburgers in one shot.
Pretty much saying that oh, what are you talking about? You cannot be a vegan and be a successful bodybuilder, or if you do, it's going to be just way too difficult, and you're going to lose all your gains, and you're going to lose like 15 pounds in the first month of going vegan. And then on the other side of the spectrum, the proponents of a vegan lifestyle in accordance with bodybuilding, lots of times I hear that it can absolutely be done, and there's going to be virtually no performance difference between vegans and non-vegans, and at the same time they're saying that it's almost effortless and it just takes a few minor adjustments to your lifestyle, and they're essentially saying that anybody who says that it can't be done, no, that's just bullshit. They're just trying to cover up the fact that they love meat and they want to keep eating steak, hot dogs, burgers, and theoretically it's completely doable. And to be honest guys, I think both sides are somewhat misrepresenting the issue. They're kind of like swaying the facts towards their side. You've got the vegans who are like unicorns and puppies. Actually, no unicorns and puppies, those are animals. Hemp and tree bark and flowers, and they're saying that it's completely perfect and it's a magical world and it's completely okay. And then you've got the other side, which is saying like, no, you're gonna crash and burn and you're gonna like, why did I go vegan? No! I wish I could reverse the sands of time. So I just want to make this video and pretty much cut through 95% of the crap and leave just, the facts that matter to you guys, the viewers. And in addition, I feel that I am as impartial as you can, possibly get without trying to toot my own horn. The reason behind that is, number one, obviously, for clarification, I am not a vegan. I am an omnivore. I do consume meat products on a regular occasion. But at the same time, I really value and respect, the concept of veganism. I think that they are doing something, besides the health benefits, which are for themselves, they are doing something which, it's for the environment, it's for like ethical, moral reasons, and it's something which I myself could not do. But fortunately, for the purpose of this video, I think I can apply that and bounce back and forth between either sides of the spectrum. This is me, but that's pretty cool too. And although this is my lifestyle, I respect that as well. And I could remain fairly objective when looking at both sides. But enough talk, let's get into the good stuff. So although the actual word itself and topic of veganism came up in the 1940s, it only started picking up steam more recently in the 2010s. In fact, an interesting way of demonstrating this is if you actually go to Google Trends, that's like a website which allows you to see how popular a certain search word or term, has been, when it, how many times has it been searched. You can look up names, words, terms, whatever. If you look up vegan or veganism, there's a sudden spike between 2013 to 2015. In fact, it almost doubled. This is indicative of the fact that more and more people, not only do they know what veganism is, they are actively taking measures to learn about it by doing these Google searches. Well, I know some of you guys may be thinking, well, that doesn't really mean anything because, the general population of the world is growing and more people around the world are getting access to the internet and therefore Google. So all search terms are kind of getting more popular. That's not really the case. In fact, if you look at vegetarianism or vegetarian, that's pretty much been, although there's been, ups and downs, it's pretty much been flat for the last 10 years, proving that although vegan is still not as popular of a search term as vegetarian, it's growing at an exponential rate and it's becoming more and more popular. And I think there's two big reasons behind this. The first is just the mainstream media and general public outcry over veganism. In addition, you have these somewhat viral movies. For example, you got Cowspiracy, which focuses on the environmental sustainability aspects of veganism. You've got Earthlings, which focuses on the moral side of veganism, specifically the unethical treatment of animals. That one I actually did see, and I'll be honest guys, usually I'm okay with this kind of stuff, but that was really friggin' hard to watch. Forks Over Knives, which is a movie that focuses on the health aspects and health benefits of a vegan-based diet. And the second, and in my opinion, the biggest influencer of this vegan movement over the last few years is simply social media. You've got so many people just here on YouTube, for example. You've got Fully Raw Christina, that Banana Girl, Frisbee the Banana Girl, and then of course you've got, everybody's favorite Vegan Gains. And I've mentioned him in the past because I kind of have mixed feelings on him and his channel. On one side, he's very informative and he's very passionate about, what he loves. But on the other hand, he's a sociopath, and even though he is informative, oftentimes I find his videos, it's very evident that his level of bias is over 9,000! But apparently it seems that hate and controversy are really good for YouTube. So maybe... That's right guys, Vitruvian Physique is going vegan, and if you don't as well, I'm gonna come to your house and shove Tofurkey up your ass! Am I at 100,000 subs yet? No? Damn it. But just to clarify guys, this video isn't going to focus on any of those individual factors. We're not going to focus on the environmental side, the moral side, the health side. Otherwise this video would take 4 hours to fully get through. We are solely going to focus on the question of veganism and bodybuilding. Can they be done together? And if so, with what level of difficulty? Okay guys, so as I mentioned in my previous video, there's a lot of controversy going on, in the fitness community as to what is the ideal, or required intake of protein. Some people say that it's 1 gram per pound of body weight. Some people say it's significantly less. Some people say the opposite. They're saying you have to go way higher than that. In that video, I provided a few pieces of scientific evidence, and it is in my opinion, based on the research that I saw, that 0.8 to 1.0 grams of protein per pound of body weight is kind of the ideal range. 0.8 being a little bit lower, 1.0 being a little bit higher, to be a little bit more on the safe side, but generally anywhere when you're in there, you are okay. Now I know some of you guys may be thinking that this is in direct, opposition or contrast to some of the, vegan fitness YouTubers out there. For example, John Venus in his video talked about how he can go as low as 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight.
A lot of bro scientists are saying that you need about, 1 gram per pound of body weight. And that's crazy, that's bullshit, seriously. Studies have shown that there is no difference in protein synthesis between groups of people who are eating 0.6 grams per pound of body weight compared to those who are eating 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight.
In addition, we have Brian Turner. He's a good friend of mine. We did YouTube House together, and he started his cut recently going as low as about 0.65 to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight.
I'm starting this contest prep at about 215 pounds. I never want to go below probably 145. Yeah, I'd say about 145 grams of protein.
And to be honest guys, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I'm starting to think that it is negatively affecting his physique. I gotta be honest with you. Motherfucker! But for the purpose of this video, I do need to take a concise, quantitative standpoint, which can be considered ideal, maybe not sufficient or borderline, but ideal protein intake. And I'm gonna have to quote a book. This is the Muscle and Strength Pyramid nutrition version by Eric Helms. For those of you guys that don't know this guy, I admire, from a knowledge standpoint, probably, one of the people more than anybody in this industry, do I value his opinion on these matters. And in his actual book, he writes, and I quote, 0.8 to 1.0 grams of protein per pound of body weight when you are bulking, and going as high as 1.1 to 1.3 grams of protein when you are in a caloric deficit and you are, you're cutting. This is why Matt Ogus, for example, has been cutting. Even though the guy weighs 170 or something, I believe his protein has been as high as 200 grams and more. So obviously you've got a pretty decent range, anywhere from 0.8 to 1.3. But, at the end of the day, the moral of the story is you need a lot of protein. A person my weight, being about 205 pounds, I would need upwards of 200 grams of protein and more if I was in a caloric deficit. And let's be honest guys, if you go and ask like 10 random bodybuilders online what their favorite sources of protein are, 9 out of 10 of them are going to say the exact same thing: chicken titties and milk cocaine, otherwise known as chicken breast and whey protein powder. In fact, without actually specifying vegan sources of protein, if you go and you ask like 10 random people on the street to name their top 5 favorite sources of protein, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 of them will not accidentally name a vegan protein source. It's not common. Although this has been changing over the last few decades with things like globalization, when foods from other cultures are all kind of like mixing together, and Eastern foods are coming into Western culture. An example of this is tofu, but let's be honest, you probably never even had any until the mid-2000s when you walked into a Japanese restaurant, and even then you probably just thought it was a shitty ripoff of marshmallows which they forgot to flavor. Why do these marshmallows taste like fish testicles? Also, sometimes online I have seen vegans using examples like cows, bulls, and gorillas, and they're saying like, look at these powerful, mammals, they're so big and they're so full of muscle and they're so strong. And if they rely on a purely vegan diet, obviously because they're herbivores, why can't you? What's your excuse? This doesn't really make sense for 2 reasons. Number one, we don't have the same digestive tracts as them. For example, I think a cow has 4 stomachs, so, it's kind of unfair. And the other thing you have to consider is these animals need to eat. Have you ever seen one of those nature shows, with like the gorillas and they're sitting there? What are they doing? Yeah, they're eating. And then the rest of the time, they're eating. And then sometimes they're sleeping, but then the rest of the time, they're eating. They have to eat all day, every day. This is because the foods they eat are so low in calories and their bodies require so much energy just to sustain their current mass. I mean, some of these gorillas are like 300, 400, 500 pounds of pure muscle. They need to eat so much more volume of food, and we humans, we can't. Well, at least we don't want to do that. We want to, eat a meal for like 20 minutes and then go on with the rest of our day and maintain like on 3 to 4 meals a day, which means, out of a 24-hour day, we may spend like 1 hour actually eating throughout the whole time. Okay, so one of the issues I've noticed is that a lot of these foods that, vegans advocate as being high protein sources, we're talking chickpeas, beans, lentils, there's so many different ones. Obviously they do have a reasonable amount of protein, but in addition, they have a reasonable amount of carbohydrates. Now, this is one thing which I think animal-based protein sources, have a clear-cut advantage. Next time you're eating chicken or steak or, pretty much anything, go look at the nutrition label. It's going to be mostly protein. Depending on how lean the cut is, it might have some fat. Carbohydrates is low, and by low I mean 0. Legit, there's usually no carbohydrates whatsoever in your meat source. So some of you guys may be wondering, well, what's the problem? In your videos you're always talking about, oh, carbs are your friend, carbs equal strength, carbs equal size, and you're absolutely right. For bulking, this is kind of a problem when it comes to cutting. When you're bulking, that's fantastic. My biggest problem right now with my off season is that I just can't get enough carbohydrates. I'm always like, get your protein, get your protein. Did you get your protein? Okay. Did you get your carbs? No? Fuck! In terms of cutting, this is a significant problem. In one of Vegan Gains' video, I actually really enjoyed this one. Again, the informative aspect sometimes shines through all the crazy. He talked about de novo lipogenesis. Without getting too advanced, in layman's terms, this is pretty much when your body takes in so many excess carbohydrates that it starts synthesizing lipids, which is a fancy way of saying fat. And that's why it's called de novo, meaning new, because it is synthesizing fat from non-fat sources. So not triglycerides, fatty acids that your body ingests. It actually has to take ingested carbohydrates, change them into fatty acids, which will then go to your fat cells, go in your fat cells, blow them up, you get fat, etc. This doesn't happen as commonly as one may think. This is why in my off-season I'm a big advocate of high carbohydrates and moderate to low-ish fat intake diets, because only when carbohydrate intakes break that arbitrary level, which varies for everyone, only then will you start getting fat. So I think although you can get fat in both ways, I think it's a lot easier for you to get fat off a high fat than versus a high carbohydrate diet. So you may be thinking, okay, that's great. So carbohydrates good, protein good. What's the problem? Well, when you're bulking, there is no problem. It's awesome. When you're cutting, this is not necessarily the case. You are consuming, your protein from sources which also have high carbohydrates. It's going to be difficult for you to get high protein, low carb, which is pretty much the main way that most of us diet. When your carbohydrate intake is high, it's going to be harder for you to get into that caloric state without drastically reducing your fat, which I don't recommend because there is a minimal amount of fat that we do have to ingest. So if we have high protein, high carbs, it's going to be very difficult for you to lose body fat. which means that when it comes to a vegan diet in terms of bulking, it's awesome, but when it comes to cutting, I think it's very, very difficult because you don't have access to those high protein, zero or low carbohydrate foods that you would if you were consuming meat. But at the same time, without sounding overly negative, I do think that there is a viable solution to this. When you're dieting and you're having, like, let's say vegetables, chicken and rice, that's your carbohydrate source, and then chicken is your protein source. When you're dieting as a vegan, perhaps you can't have like a protein and carbohydrate source because your protein is your carbohydrate source. So instead of having like, multiple different, on your plate, you've got your red, you've got your green, and then you've got your yellow, so your protein, your carbs, and your fat. Well, as a vegan, you may just have one big jumble of stuff, and it's gonna be both your protein and carbohydrate source, which, as long as you take that into consideration, that you are intaking higher carbs from your protein source, that should be okay. Okay guys, I just want to throw in one more Excel chart just because you know how much I love counting and quantifying this kind of stuff. So we have 5 examples of protein sources, 2 animal-based, 3 vegan-based, and then we have 3 metrics at the top, which we can kind of illustrate and talk about these topics. We have protein per 100 grams of weight. So just, protein density, how much protein is in these items by mass or volume. Carbohydrates, so, how good are these items or these protein sources for cutting, and price, because, we have to be a little bit real world applicable here. So let's go over the first one. We're going to throw in some conditional formatting just to make it a bit more visible. Chicken breast, not bad. Whey protein is awesome, but that's what you're paying for, right? You want to pay for protein. I don't want to pay for other, bullshit. Tofu is terrible. I was surprised by this. In fact, it's about 1/4 of chicken breast, meaning that if you want to get the equivalent amount of protein, you would need to eat 4 times the tofu as opposed to chicken breast. That kind of sucks. You're going to be sitting there eating it all day. Black beans and chickpeas, better than tofu, worse than animal sources, but they're vegan, so, give and take. Carbohydrates, great for chicken breast. 0 grams. I mean, you can eat that stuff all day for a low carb or, potentially ketogenic diet if you're doing that, if you're really, really super intense. Whey protein, pretty good. Tofu, not bad. It seems as if tofu is just in general a low macronutrient density food. So whether you're, cutting or bulking, you're gonna have to eat a lot of it if you want to get your protein. But fortunately, the carbs are low. When it comes to black beans and chickpeas, they were okay protein, but when it comes to carbohydrates, this is where they fall short. And by short, I mean insanely high on carbohydrates. If you are cutting, it is very problematic and very difficult to, only eat these vegan sources for protein purposes and, still get carbohydrate intake. You can't go have a snack. You can't go have dessert or fruit or whatever you want afterwards because you've got a lot of carbohydrates already from your protein / carbohydrate source. Chicken breast, not bad. Whey protein, it looks like it's high, but it's not because you have to factor in the high protein intake. So in terms of actual dollars per protein, it's fairly good. Tofu is okay. Black beans and chickpeas are awesome. This is where they kind of redeem themselves because, I mean, come on, you can get like a pound of black beans in a can for like $1 or something, and 50 cents for this one serving. So if you were to actually multiply the protein times the dollar amount, whether you're talking vegan, non-vegan, pescatarian, semi-magic vegan, I don't care. Black beans and chickpeas are very good for the actual dollars per, dollars spent per protein, regardless of lifestyle choice. So guys, the one thing I want to really illustrate with this, look at all the different stuff we have here. We have red, we have green, we have yellow, we have good protein sources, we have bad protein sources when it comes to carbs, protein. It depends on what are your life choices. Where are you in your fitness journey? Are you cutting? Are you bulking? Is price a big factor for you? Is carbohydrates, the most, the key element for you in your diet? It's not black and white. It's not even gray. It's a friggin' rainbow. So as much as we would like to think, protein absorption is not a universal constant for all, protein sources. It's not like, a gram of protein from chicken breast is absorbed, by the same percentage as a gram of protein from cheese or a gram of protein from broccoli, or, every source has a different protein absorption ratio. Fortunately, there is a way to quantify and measure, approximately how much of a protein source is actually absorbed and utilized by your body. This is simply called the biological value. So a little backstory, in my how much protein do you need video, the one I mentioned earlier in this video, I talk about something called nitrogen balance. This is simply a measurement that you can do, in the lab through experimentation, and essentially it determines whether or not you are getting sufficient or more than sufficient protein intake. If you are in a positive nitrogen balance, you're getting more or enough protein for whatever it is you need, whether it's muscle synthesis or just basic body repair. Remember, protein is used by your cells for numerous reasons. Everything is composed of proteins, not just your muscles. And if you are in a negative nitrogen balance, that means that you are getting insufficient protein intake. The reason it's called nitrogen balance, and guys, I don't want to extrapolate and talk about this too much because this can go on forever, but protein, when you look closely at them, they're actually composed of building blocks. Those building blocks are amino acids. You know how we talk about those BCAAs, amino acids. Are you getting enough? Either way, every single amino acid at its molecular structure, one of the fundamental aspects of all amino acids and protein in general is an amino or nitrogen group. So these nitrogen, otherwise known as amino groups, are found in amino acids, which are found in protein. And if you have sufficient all of that, that must mean that you are in a positive nitrogen balance, which is what we want when it comes to protein. So what biological value, or BV, is simply nitrogen used by your body for tissue synthesis divided by nitrogen actually ingested by your body times 100 to make it a percentage. So this way you have a standardized model, 0 being absolutely terrible, 100 being very good, meaning that a large portion of the nitrogen and protein actually ingested by your body, what you eat, is actually, ending up in the tissue that you synthesize. All right, guys, this is a graph that I just made quickly. These are just some examples of protein sources and their associated biological values. If anybody wants to look up any of this stuff, I will include resources down in the description below. Anyway, the first thing that will jump out to me is that animal-based protein sources are way, more towards the left and therefore higher values. Everything seems to be around the 100 or 90, or in the case of whey protein isolate, actually 159. That's how crazy high it is. If you guys are wondering how could it be over 100, the 100 is just an arbitrary score they made up. It's based on eggs. Eggs is like the perfect 100 value, so rarely is stuff higher than eggs. But in the case of supplements, it is. That's why it can go over 100. Everything else is usually like close to it or below. One thing that is interesting is that beef, chicken, fish is actually like maybe 1 or 2 points above soy. So, in that case, tofu is actually a pretty good alternative. But then other stuff like wheat, peanuts, other kinds of lentils and grains, they really start to fall off towards the 60 and 50 and even lower mark. So, they fall off a little bit. They may no longer be the best sources. Okay guys, so let's say that you are getting sufficient protein. You counted your macros, whether it be vegan or non-vegan sources, you believe you are getting sufficient protein intake. That's fantastic. Are you done? Not necessarily. So like I mentioned, proteins are composed of amino acids, and there are 20 different kinds of amino acids. Fortunately, we can synthesize in our body using food and things that we ingest, 11 of them. 9 of them, however, we cannot synthesize. That is why they are called essential amino acids, because they are essential to ingest from food for your body to retain normal function and, most importantly, muscle synthesis. By this logic, let's say that theoretically, an individual was to eat nothing but like 1 or 2, sources of protein because they just really love those foods, or it's much more accessible to them, or whatever the circumstances. Theoretically, you can be consuming like 500 grams of protein, but you may not be getting sufficient amino acids because maybe those 2 protein types have 18 of the 20 amino acids. And even though you have so much protein, you are specifically missing those, 1 or 2 amino acids, which are absolutely essential to your health and, gains. Again, this brings up the concept which I've been mentioning throughout this video, and, it's the question, are all protein sources made equally? And once again, I reiterate, the answer is no. And as you guys know, with my channel, if I can't count it and I can't measure it, I don't like it, I don't trust it. That is not the case here. The FDA and the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually use something called the Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score, or PDCAAS, which gives you from 0 to 1, it's a standardized score, pretty much how good or bad is the amino acid profile of a protein source. And in addition, the score also touches somewhat upon protein absorption rate, similar to the biological value. So that is awesome, because anything additional that you can quantify when it comes to this somewhat confusing topic, absolutely lay it on me. So essentially, most animal-based protein sources are complete sources of protein. They have a full spectrum of all the amino acids, and this is not really the case with some of these vegan-based protein sources. But before you guys are thinking, that's it, it's the end of the world, the topic is closed, as long as you are getting a reasonable variety of protein sources from your vegan diet, you should be okay. Which means if you are purely eating like rice protein powder, that's a problem. You may be missing out on a few essential amino acids. But if you have like, tofu, soy protein powder, rice protein powder, beans, lentils, if you just have a little bit of variety in your foods, I think you should be okay. It all kind of comes together and, it's kind of like teamwork. We talked about how a vegan-based diet may be a little bit problematic for those who are cutting, but what about on the other hand? When it comes to bulking, I said that, vegan diets have a somewhat high propensity to include carbohydrate-dense foods, which is great for bulking, but does that mean that you can just eat all this food and you're gonna grow massive? There are some problems with this. In fact, there was actually a video by Bradley Martin where he kind of touched upon this. He's a big dude, his basal metabolic rate is legit probably in the 4,000 to 5,000 range just to support that frame of muscle. So he's got to get a lot of calories. And when he switched to a vegan diet, just I think to try it out for like a week or two,
I lost I'm not gonna lie, I lost fucking 10 pounds really quick.
Probably had so much less calories.
and he spoke about the fact that it's just way too much food to consume. So when it comes to vegan bulking, there are two problems. Number one, fruits, vegetables, and beans, grains, lentils, all these things, they're going to be high in fiber. Now, fiber is a fantastic thing when you are getting a reasonable amount. For a person my size, I believe it's about 35 grams daily. But if you're going to be eating a vegan diet, it's very easy to go 50, 60, more grams of fiber per day. Some of you guys may be thinking, well, that's not a problem. Fiber is my friend. Yes and no. Not only does fiber bind to water very well, it's also not metabolized the same way as normal carbohydrates. Without getting too much into this, pretty much what happens is if you consume too much fiber and very abruptly, let's say you switched over, rapidly to a vegan-based diet, and your daily, fiber intake goes from an average of 20 to like 40, 50, 60 grams per day, it can make you feel very bloated. The second problem with bulking on a vegan diet is simply food volume. Now guys, when it comes to satiation, which is just a fancy word for how full you are, calories matter. Are you consuming 4,000 calories or 2,000 calories? But another factor is very important as well. The actual physical stretching of the stomach. This is because in the actual lining of your stomach, there are these things called mechanoreceptors. Now, receptors are just these things which can interpret and, send out signals. For example, neuroreceptors, they use neural transmitters, which are actually just, little, chemicals. For example, hormones is an example of this. Now that's chemical, but when it comes to mechanical, we're talking physical stretch, physical, something that's happening in your body. Now, when your stomach stretches, this sends a mechanical input into your mechanoreceptors, which can send stimulations or just messages to your brain saying, holy crap, something's happening, we are stretching, whatever, the signal that I am meant to interpret, it's happening now. So in turn, your stomach senses, oh man, stomach is stretching, I am full. This is why theoretically, if you consume a lot of vegetables and a lot of water, even though that may only be like, 100 calories, from the physical stretching portion of satiation, you may feel as full as if you were to consume the same volume of food, but it was very high calorie, fat, carbohydrate, protein, all the good stuff. This becomes somewhat problematic because a lot of vegan foods are not that calorically dense, assuming you're not eating complete bullshit like, I can't even name any vegan junk food. That's how healthy you guys are. So, props to you vegans out there. So pretty much theoretically, you can feel completely stuffed and full off of 200 calories if you're consuming it solely from like some massive, bowl of spinach. In terms of physical volume, it's a massive amount of food. But in terms of calories, it's not actually that much. I mean, you could probably take all of the calories found in that salad and it would be the same as like a Big Mac or two or something. This is awesome for cutting because it helps you feel very full even though you're consuming less calories, so that way you don't have problems with hunger. For bulking, this is very problematic because even though you ate 5 pounds of lettuce, you just got like 300 calories or something. By the way guys, I'm not kidding, I actually did the math. 5 pounds of lettuce really is like 300 calories, which is ridiculous because you're pretty much eating a baby. Guys, this is insane. Like, it makes me think, how do you not get shredded if all you do is eat vegetables all day, every day? How the hell was my childhood pet guinea pig so fat? All that fucker did is eat vegetables all day. Get your shit together, squiggles! Okay guys, that is it. That is the end of the video. I apologize if it went so long, but there's just a lot of stuff I want to cover. I don't want to leave anything out. I want you, the viewer, to be as informed as possible. So at the end of the day, guys, when it comes to my personal verdict on vegan bodybuilding, can it be done? Absolutely. You just have to enter it with the right state of mind and understand that it is not easy. It will be difficult. But if you make the necessary adjustments to your lifestyle, you make the necessary calculations when it comes to your macronutrient intake, it can absolutely be done. You just got to work for it. Isn't that right, squiggles?
That's right.